While they parade status like peacocks, you're still begging for validation. Kings don't chase applause, they acquire leverage. Stay addicted to attention, and you'll die broke and obedient. Status is a stage. Lights, applause, spectators, and you desperate to be seen. You were trained to confuse visibility with value. A blue check mark, a luxury badge, a car that screams louder than your bank account. You think attention equals power. It doesn't. Attention is bait. Power is ownership. Status is theater. It exists only in the eyes of others. It requires witnesses. It collapses in silence. Real wealth is warfare. It does not perform. It positions. It acquires. It controls. The man chasing status asks, "How do they see me?" The man building assets asks, "What do I own?" One is obsessed with perception. The other is obsessed with leverage. Understand this. Status is rented. Assets are owned. You can rent status with debt. You can lease admiration with monthly payments. You can finance a lifestyle that makes strangers nod in approval. But assets don't care about applause. Assets generate cash flow while you sleep. Assets multiply quietly. Assets give you options. Options are power. The world has conditioned you to worship the visible. Social media is a cathedral of performers. Everyone. BROADCASTING highlights. Nobody showing balance sheets. You scroll and feel inferior because someone else appears elevated. But elevation without ownership is illusion. The man flexing a watch may not own the company that manufactures it. The man driving the car likely doesn't own the bank that financed it. The influencer selling success may not own a single appreciating asset. He owns attention. Someone else owns equity. And equity always wins. Status requires maintenance. Gets fragile. Miss a payment. Lose relevance. Age. Make one social mistake. Crowd turns. Assets don't care if you're trending. They compound in silence. You've been hypnotized into believing that social dominance equals financial dominance. That if people respect you, you're powerful. Respect without leverage is theater applause. Loud, temporary, worthless. Real power is asymmetrical. It's when you can walk away and the system still pays you. It's when you don't need to impress anyone because your balance sheet does the talking privately. The loudest man in the room is usually negotiating from weakness. Why? Because he needs witnesses. The wealthy operator doesn't announce moves. He accumulates. He positions capital into assets that outlive trends. He understands that reputation can collapse overnight, but ownership endures. Look at the men around you. Who are they trying to impress? Women? Peers? Strangers on the internet? Status is a mating display. A peacock spreading feathers. Bright, decorative, vulnerable. Assets are territory, land, equity, ownership stakes, intellectual property, systems. Predators don't display feathers. They secure territory, and territory produces food. You've been chasing feathers. That's why you feel busy but not powerful, visible but not stable, admired but not free. Freedom is not applause. Freedom is when your expenses are covered by assets you control. Freedom is when you can refuse offers without fear. Freedom is when you are not dependent on approval for income. Status makes you reactive. Assets make you sovereign. When you pursue status, you enter a competition with every other insecure man. You escalate spending. You upgrade to signal rank. You measure yourself against illusions. When you pursue assets, you enter a competition with mathematics. And mathematics rewards patience. One path feeds ego. The other feeds leverage. Here is the brutal truth. If your lifestyle grows faster than your assets, you are not ascending. You are decorating your cage. Status is decoration. Assets are escape routes. The world applauds decoration because it's entertaining. Nobody claps when you quietly buy equity in a boring company. Nobody celebrates when you increase cash reserves. Nobody congratulates you for declining unnecessary expenses. But those moves compound. The applause fades. The equity remains. You must decide which game you're playing. Are you performing for spectators? Or are you building a private empire? Because you cannot fully commit to both. Every dollar spent to impress is a soldier removed from your army of capital. And in warfare, numbers matter. This is your lens shift. Stop asking how powerful you look. Start asking how much control you own. Status is noise. Assets are weapons. Choose your battlefield. Your brain was not designed for balance sheets. It was designed for status signals. Before banks, before stock markets, before corporations, there were tribes. And in tribes, survival depended on visibility. Who had the strongest body? Who had the best ornaments? Who received the most attention from women? Who commanded the loudest reactions? Signals meant safety. If others admired you, you were protected. If others desired you, your genes survived. If others feared you, you weren't challenged. Your nervous system still runs that ancient software. That's why a luxury logo triggers you. That's why public praise feels intoxicating. That's why being ignored feels like death. Status is visible, immediate, emotional. Assets are invisible, delayed, rational, and your brain prefers immediate rewards over delayed control. This is the trap. A car is a visible signal. Equity in a logistics company is invisible leverage. One produces dopamine. The other produces dominance. Dopamine is loud. It spikes. It crashes. It demands repetition. Leverage is quiet. It accumulates. It compounds. It requires discipline. The average man is neurologically hijacked by visible symbols. He cannot resist the hit of external validation. He needs proof that he is winning right now. So he buys signals, clothes, gadgets, vacations, experiences designed for display. He doesn't buy assets because assets don't impress anyone at dinner. You can't photograph ownership percentage. You can't post retained earnings on Instagram and expect applause. You can't wear compound interest on your wrist. So the brain chooses what gets attention. And attention is a drug. The more you chase visible signals, the more your brain associates power with visibility. You begin to believe that being seen equals being significant. But significance without leverage is dependency. Let's break it surgically. Visible signals operate on perception. Invisible leverage operates on control. Perception can be manipulated. Control cannot be faked. You can lease a lifestyle. You cannot lease net worth without paying for it later. The psychology is simple. Your ego wants recognition. Your future requires restraint. Ego screams. Restraint whispers. Most men obey the scream because restraint feels like losing. When your friends upgrade, restraint feels like falling behind. When someone posts success, restraint feels like inadequacy. When a woman reacts to visible luxury, restraint feels like weakness. But what you're actually experiencing is withdrawal from attention. You are addicted to being noticed. And addiction makes you predictable. Predictable men are easy to sell to. Predictable men are easy to control. Corporations understand your wiring better than you do. They design products that scream status because they know you crave signals. Marketing isn't about utility, it's about tribal positioning. Buy this and you will be seen as higher value. You comply. Meanwhile, the shareholders, the ones who own the company selling you signals, are accumulating invisible leverage. You fund their dominance while performing yours. That's the psychological inversion. The buyer feels powerful. The owner becomes powerful. One consumes signals. The other accumulates systems. And systems generate recurring power. Here's the brutal reality. If your financial decisions are influenced by how others will perceive them, you are not sovereign. You are socially programmed. Sovereignty begins when perception becomes irrelevant. When you can drive a modest car without feeling diminished. When you can stay silent about wins without needing applause. When you measure yourself by assets owned, not reactions triggered. That is neurological reprogramming. You must train yourself to derive satisfaction from accumulation, not admiration. To feel excitement over equity growth, not aesthetic upgrades. To experience pride in restraint, not display. Because invisible leverage compounds while visible signals depreciate. The watch loses value. The car ages. The vacation ends. The applause fades. But equity reinvested expands. Cash flow multiplied scales. Ownership stacked becomes control. And control is the ultimate status because it doesn't need witnesses. This is the mechanism. The masses chase visible rank. The elite build invisible power. Your brain wants to be seen. Your future requires you to be strategic. If you cannot override your primitive craving for signals, you will always trade long-term dominance for short-term applause. And applause does not pay dividends. There are two men in every economy. One is visible. The other is dangerous. The first man is the applauded fool. He is not stupid in IQ, he is stupid in priorities. He optimizes for reaction. He buys what can be seen. He posts what can be envied. He spends where it can be noticed. His decisions orbit around one question: how does this raise my status? He upgrades apartments beyond his leverage. He finances vehicles that drain cash flow. He wears brands that signal wealth he hasn't built. He calls it living well. In reality, he is broadcasting liquidity while possessing none. He confuses lifestyle with power. His income increases, his expenses inflate. His circle earns more, he escalates spending. His social exposure grows, he amplifies performance. He is trapped in a visibility arms race. And arms races bankrupt fragile empires. The applauded fool depends on audience feedback. When validation rises, he feels elevated. When attention drops, he panics. His identity is externally regulated. He is owned by perception. Now meet the second man, the silent accumulator. He does not look impressive at first glance. He does not chase reaction. He does not escalate spending to compete. He does not reveal positioning. His decisions orbit around one question: what increases control? He studies cash flow. He allocates capital. He acquires equity in boring systems. While the fool upgrades his image, the accumulator upgrades ownership. While the fool seeks admiration, the accumulator secures leverage. The fool wants to look rich. The accumulator wants to be unmovable. Let's dissect their patterns. Spending pattern. The fool spends to signal rank. Restaurants beyond necessity. Vacations curated for visibility. Gadgets purchased for prestige. The accumulator spends to expand capacity. Tools, skills, networks that produce returns. He sees consumption as a trade-off against future dominance. Time pattern. The fool spends hours curating perception. Social positioning, networking for optics. Being seen in the right rooms. The accumulator spends hours analyzing systems. Studying markets, negotiating deals. Building streams of income that don't require his constant presence. One performs. The other engineers. Risk pattern. The fool takes emotional risks trying to maintain image. He cannot tolerate looking average. Average feels like death to his ego. The accumulator takes calculated financial risk, structured, strategic, asymmetric. He is comfortable appearing average while building extraordinary foundations. He understands something the fool never learns. Visibility invites competition. Invisibility builds strength. The fool wants the spotlight. The accumulator wants the leverage behind the spotlight. And here's the cruel irony. The fool often earns more early. High income, fast lifestyle, quick recognition. But because he scales expenses with income, he remains fragile. One market downturn, one job loss, one reputational hit, collapse. The accumulator may look slower, but his base expands quietly. Assets stack. Cash reserves grow. Equity multiplies. When turbulence hits, he doesn't collapse. He acquires. That is the difference between performer and predator. The fool celebrates income. The accumulator celebrates ownership. Income requires effort. Ownership extracts effort from others. One trades time, the other controls systems. The fool measures himself against peers. The accumulator measures himself against independence. And independence is invisible. This is why you often admire the wrong man. You see the visible symbols. You don't see the balance sheet. You envy the performer. You overlook the owner. Because ownership is silent. But silence is where power consolidates. Understand this clearly. The applauded fool lives upward and fragile. The silent accumulator lives modest and armored. One must constantly prove himself. The other doesn't need to. One is selected by trends. The other survives them. Now look at yourself. When you get paid, what do you upgrade first? Your image or your leverage? Your lifestyle or your ownership? Your answer reveals which archetype you serve. You cannot be both, because every dollar is a vote. Every purchase either feeds ego or fortifies sovereignty. And sovereignty requires sacrifice of visibility. Most men refuse that sacrifice. They would rather look powerful than become unassailable. That is why the applauded fool is common, and the silent accumulator is rare. History does not reward the loud. It records them. There is a difference. The loud men give speeches. The unseen men finance them. The loud men march at the front. The unseen men control the supply lines. And supply lines win wars. You've been conditioned to admire figureheads. Kings, influencers, celebrities, public faces of success. But figureheads are visible precisely because someone else is funding the structure behind them. Visibility is often a distraction from control. Empires were not built by the most charismatic man in the room. They were built by the ones who understood land, logistics, currency, and leverage. The general may win battles. The financier determines whether wars continue. Study any major power structure, political, corporate, cultural. There is always a visible layer, and beneath it, an ownership layer. The visible layer absorbs praise and criticism. The ownership layer accumulates returns regardless of public opinion. The crowd debates personalities. The owners calculate margins. This pattern repeats across centuries. Public rulers change. Asset holders persist. You are trained to follow faces. But power hides in equity. The man with followers is influential. The man with controlling shares is sovereign. Influence fluctuates. Ownership compounds. And compounding is the quiet architect of empires. Consider how markets function. When economic crises strike, the visible performers panic. Their income drops. Their audience shrinks. Their leverage evaporates because it was never structural. But the asset holders? They wait. When valuations collapse, they buy. When fear spreads, they deploy capital. Because they built reserves during applause seasons. Recessions do not create wealth gaps. They reveal them. The visible class is exposed as fragile. The invisible class expands territory. This is not conspiracy. It is structure. Those who control assets control outcomes. You may know the CEO's name. You probably don't know the institutional investors behind him. Yet those investors decide direction, strategy, compensation, survival. They don't trend. They own. Human nature prefers stories over spreadsheets. That's why heroes are romanticized while shareholders remain obscure. Stories are entertaining. Spreadsheets are decisive. The masses emotionally attached to narratives. The elite attached to cash flow. This is the deep threat. If you spend your life optimizing for narrative, how impressive your life looks, you will always serve those. Optimizing for structure. Because structure absorbs narrative. The celebrity endorses a product. The shareholders profit from the sales. The influencer markets aspiration. The equity holders collect revenue. Applause is monetized by someone, and that someone is rarely the one clapping. History is ruthless in this pattern. Visible leaders fall. Dynasties crumble. Trends shift. But diversified asset ownership outlives ideology. Governments change. Markets fluctuate. Cultural icons fade, but land still produces. Companies still generate revenue. Capital still seeks returns. The unseen layer remains. Here's the uncomfortable realization. If your name is the asset, you are vulnerable. If your name owns assets, you are insulated. The loud must maintain relevance. The unseen must maintain discipline. Relevance is fragile. Discipline scales. And empires are built on scale, not applause. Even in modern digital economies, the pattern repeats. Creators chase subscribers. Platforms capture equity. Employees chase promotions. Founders retain ownership. Consumers chase status. Investors acquire the companies selling it. Every hierarchy hides a deeper hierarchy, and the deeper one controls distribution. You are not competing against your peers for status. You are competing against time for ownership. Time rewards assets. Time punishes ego. The man who looks dominant at 25 may be financially hollow at 45. The man who looked modest at 25 may control systems at 45. History favors the patient predator. It does not celebrate him loudly. It empowers him quietly. If you align with visibility, you ride waves. If you align with ownership, you build tide patterns. One depends on the crowd's attention. The other depends on capital allocation. And capital allocation decides the future. The lesson is surgical. Stop admiring the front of the empire. Start studying the back, because the back owns the front. Now we remove illusion and install protocol. Wealth is not an accident. It is a code. And codes reward discipline, not emotion. If you want assets instead of applause, you need behavioral surgery, not motivation. Not inspiration, surgery. Here is the first incision. 1. Kill lifestyle inflation. When income rises, your lifestyle must remain controlled. The weak man celebrates a raise with upgrades. The strategic man celebrates a raise with acquisition. Every increase in income is not a reward, it is ammunition. You do not celebrate ammunition. You deploy it. If your expenses grow at the same rate as your earnings, you are running in place. You look elevated, but you are structurally stagnant. Freeze lifestyle. Expand ownership. That is the first code. 2. Convert income into assets immediately. Income sitting idle is vulnerable. Income displayed is wasted. Income deployed becomes leverage. Your money must be assigned soldiers' roles, some to cash reserves, some to appreciating assets, some to scalable systems. You do not ask, "What can I buy?" You ask, "What can I own that pays me back?" This shift alone separates consumer from controller. Consumers exchange money for experience. Controllers exchange money for cash flow. 3. Stack leverage quietly. Leverage is not loud. It is layered. Ownership in businesses. Equity in markets. Skills that increase earning power. Networks that provide asymmetric opportunities. You do not reveal your full position. Silence protects leverage. The more visible your ambition, the more resistance you attract. The more private your accumulation, the less friction you encounter. Build quietly. Expand silently. Predators do not announce hunts. 4. Detach from social proof. This is where most men fail. They cannot endure appearing average. They fear driving something modest. They fear declining expensive social rituals. They fear being underestimated. But being underestimated is a strategic advantage. If no one expects dominance from you, you build without pressure. Social proof is expensive. Silence is profitable. The ruthless man understands this. Admiration today can cost millions tomorrow. So he trains indifference. He does not need others to see progress. He measures progress in ownership percentage, not compliments. 5. Build systems, not hustles. Hustle is linear. Systems are exponential. If money stops when you stop, you are not wealthy. You are busy. Wealth requires assets that operate independent of your constant attention. Equity stakes, automated businesses, dividend-producing structures, intellectual property that scales. You are not trying to earn more hours. You are trying to own engines. Engines run without applause. 6. Play the long game relentlessly. Status is a short-term game. Assets are a long-term siege. Most men cannot think beyond 5 years. They optimize for current visibility, not future insulation. The ruthless operator thinks in decades. He asks, "What will this decision look like in 10 years? Will this expense appreciate or evaporate? Does this move increase optionality?" Optionality is freedom, and freedom is the highest form of wealth. Now understand something critical. This code is boring. It lacks glamour. It lacks applause. It lacks drama, which is exactly why it works. The masses abandon boring discipline for exciting displays. They cannot resist stimulation. You must, because wealth is not built in moments of excitement. It is built in repeated acts of restraint. Restraint when others upgrade. Restraint when others flex. Restraint when ego demands validation. You must rewire what feels good. Instead of feeling powerful when you are noticed, feel powerful when you acquire. Instead of pride in visible upgrades, feel pride in invisible leverage. This is internal dominance. And once internal dominance is installed, external dominance becomes inevitable. The ruthless wealth code is simple but unforgiving. Control spending. Deploy capital. Stack ownership. Ignore applause. Think in decades. Execute without announcement, because announcement is for performers. And you are transitioning into something else, something quieter, more patient, more dangerous. The final obstacle is not money. It's identity. You are not broke because you lack income. You are broke because you still crave an audience. Inside you, there is a spectator. He imagines how others see him. He fantasizes about admiration. He measures his worth through reactions. As long as that identity lives, you will sabotage accumulation. because the spectator prioritizes image over infrastructure. He wants visible proof of success. He wants lifestyle evidence. He wants social confirmation that he is ascending. But sovereignty requires invisibility during construction, and the spectator cannot tolerate invisibility. So he must die. Identity death is violent, not emotional strategic. You stop explaining your moves. You stop broadcasting your progress. You stop seeking reassurance. You move differently. When friends upgrade, you do not react. When someone flaunts wealth, you do not compare. When applause is available, you decline the stage. Because the stage is a trap. The sovereign does not perform for the crowd. He owns the venue. This is the replacement identity. You are no longer a man trying to look powerful. You are a man engineering insulation. You think in structures, not spectacles. You analyze balance sheets, not aesthetics. You track net worth, not impressions. Where the spectator asked, "Do they respect me?" the sovereign asks, "Can they affect me?" Respect is volatile. Control is durable. When you become sovereign, your emotional reactions shrink. You are not triggered by status displays. You are not impressed by superficial upgrades. You are not pressured by social comparisons. Because you understand the timeline. Most men burn capital trying to compress status into their 20s and 30s. They want to appear dominant, early. The sovereign is willing to look ordinary now to become untouchable later. Untouchable is better than impressive. Untouchable means you can leave environments without financial fear. You can reject opportunities without desperation. You can withstand downturns without collapse. That is power. And power rarely looks flashy in its early phases. The spectator fears missing out. The sovereign fears dependency. That difference shapes every decision. When you consider a purchase, the spectator asks, "How will this elevate my image?" The sovereign asks, "Does this increase my autonomy?" Autonomy is the metric. If it doesn't increase autonomy, it is decoration. Decoration is expensive camouflage for insecurity. Kill the need to decorate. Install the need to fortify. You will notice something unsettling during this transformation. People may underestimate you. They may assume you are not progressing. They may outshine you socially. They may appear ahead. Let them. Underestimation is camouflage. Camouflage allows positioning without resistance. The spectator wants immediate validation. The sovereign wants eventual dominance. You cannot optimize for both. There will be moments when ego screams. When you want to prove yourself. When you want to signal that you are winning. That is the old identity gasping for air. Do not revive it, silence it. Because every time you perform for validation, you leak capital. And capital leakage delays sovereignty. The sovereign is comfortable in rooms where he appears average. Because he knows something others do not. Net worth is private. Control is invisible. Assets are silent. And silence compounds. This is not about becoming antisocial. It is about becoming insulated. You can still operate socially. You can still build networks. You can still negotiate and expand influence, but your core motivation shifts. You are no longer chasing applause. You are building insulation. The spectator seeks to be chosen. The sovereign chooses. Chosen men depend on selection. Sovereigns design their own leverage. Now ask yourself, if all social media disappeared tomorrow, if no one could see your lifestyle, would your power remain? If the answer is no, you are still performing. When identity shifts, decisions shift automatically. You begin to enjoy delayed gratification. You feel satisfaction in ownership growth. You prefer quiet accumulation over loud celebration. That is the psychological rebirth. The spectator dies, the sovereign emerges, not flashy, not loud, not desperate. Just positioned. There is no neutral ground. Selection is constant. Markets select. Women select. Employers select. Investors select. Time selects. And selection is ruthless. It does not reward effort. It rewards leverage. While you were upgrading your image, someone else was upgrading ownership. While you were chasing admiration, someone else was acquiring insulation. You thought you had time. Time was evaluating you. The economy does not care how impressive you look. It calculates utility. It rewards those who control assets, systems, distribution, capital. If you depend entirely on income, you are exposed. If you depend on applause, you are disposable. Disposable men are filtered out during volatility. Recessions don't destroy the weak. They reveal them. When cash flow tightens, the performers panic. Their lifestyle cannot sustain contraction. Their identity cannot handle downgrade. Their ego collapses under financial pressure. The asset builder does not panic. He prepared for contraction. He built reserves. He positioned liquidity. So when others are forced to sell, he buys. That is selection. The loud lose territory. The silent expand. And this process repeats every cycle. You are not competing against your friends. You are competing against disciplined men you do not see. Men who do not broadcast. Men who do not flex. Men who do not explain their strategy. They accumulate quietly while you debate optics. By the time you notice them, they own the board. This is your final warning. If you continue chasing status, you will become predictable. Predictable men are easy to price, easy to market to, easy to replace. But if you pivot toward assets, you become harder to displace. Because assets create optionality. Optionality creates power. Power creates immunity. And immunity is rare. The world is not divided between rich and poor. It is divided between owners and performers. Performers require attention to survive. Owners require cash flow. Attention fluctuates. Cash flow compounds. You must decide which class you enter. There will be sacrifice. You will appear less exciting, less flashy, less socially dominant at first. But in 10 years, the equation reverses. The performers will still be performing. You will be selecting. That is the long game. This is not motivational advice. It is strategic reality. You either decorate your cage and hope applause continues, or fortify your position until volatility becomes opportunity. No one is coming to rescue your financial future. No applause will convert into equity. No admiration will turn into insulation. Only assets will. So here is the elite directive. Audit your life. Identify every expense driven by validation. Redirect that capital into ownership. Measure progress privately. Move silently. Let others chase status. You accumulate control. Because when the next economic contraction arrives, and it will, the selection will accelerate. And only those with assets will dictate terms. The rest will negotiate from weakness. Choose your side.